The HBS interview is kind of like a rapid fire-ish
Yeah, too many
interview.
questions.
Correct. So it was a 30-minute interview for me. I think they would have asked me maybe 25 odd questions
Right.
to check a few things, right? One, are you accurately saying things? B,
Mm-hmm.
can you articulate properly? C, and the most important thing that they are checking for is when we put you in a case classroom, right? Which is basically a 90-minute class with 90 students.
Mm-hmm.
Will you be able to make a point, a good enough and impactful point in a succinct manner? And they're
Mm-hmm.
basically trying to test that in the interviews. I had a very clear vision board, which had pictures of what my HBS invite email would look like, what my offer letter would look like.
Oh, wow.
I had photoshopped myself in the campus on the college. And so every time when I went and saw it, was stuck in the inside of my cupboard, I just felt re-energized that I think it was one admissions webinar of HBS itself, where they literally said that we want to hear from someone who knows you really well and
Mm-hmm.
can thump the table the strongest for you. But I'll tell you what schools are looking for.
Today, this person, Arshita, will be joining us. My teammates may have informed you through their status updates, etc. It's an incredible feeling, first of all, that you get into Harvard itself. And full 100% need based tuition waiver. So what she'll be paying to Harvard will be negligible amount of money, and she'll be a Harvard MBA. That is the power of getting a scholarship, but based on your performance on the GMAT and the scholarship application you write. This is really the pinnacle of achievement in MBA admissions. There can be nothing better. It's really with a great amount of pride and pleasure I announce once again. I mean, we have spoken before in a live session, Archita. This is just one of the most fantastic achievements, and getting scholarship from two of the HSW schools. We say Holy Trinity of MBA education. It's fantastic. I generally don't hear too many scholarships for Indians from Harvard. I mean, obviously they are there need based, but we generally hear more about merit based scholarships. So welcome, fantastic to see you again. How has the week been post getting this scholarship? Probably when did you actually hear from them?
I actually heard from them maybe 3 days ago, and it's been quite relieving ever since I've gotten to know that. It's taken off a large part of the weight of what the financial outlook for the school really looks like. So, yeah, I'm very grateful. I think they've been super generous
Hmm.
in their offer, and I'm even more excited to be at school now.
So finally, it's HBS, right? No water
Yes.
now. Okay.
Yes, it's HBS. They've actually given me more scholarship than Wharton has. So
Hmm.
it was also an easier choice to make.
Right. So what about the rankings? Do you not go by current rankings? I'm just asking because
Yeah, no, I think it's a good question. I think rankings keep changing every
mhm,
year and are really dependent on how seriously the school takes employment outcomes, career
mhm,
opportunities. And I think for me, given my post MBA goals around general management in tech,
mhm.
I still knew that HBS is probably the best path to enable this.
Right.
So not as factored in by rankings. I also know that the rankings that will truly matter to me is what will come out after the 2 years. And so I really
Mhm,
can't look into the future. And I think my interactions with alumni as well as professors and the
mhm.
admissions committee has been very strong enough to convince me about the future of me in the
Right,
school.
right. So I also have to tell you that till date, anybody who has gotten into Harvard Wharton or Harvard Wharton Stanford has never chosen any other school except Harvard from my students' lists. So none of them. So everybody has chosen HBS eventually. But this. So I really want to ask, let's say right now, the people you're speaking to are preparing for round one of applications and they
Right,
will be writing the exam soon. And if they were to apply in round one, what would be
right.
some of the tips for them that you can give? Because we'll be very practical in this session because I'm talking
Sure,
to a focus group here in a way.
sure.
So just let us know what is it that you would recommend for round one.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So, I mean, if you think about timelines, effectively, most applications will be due first week of September.
Hmm.
And so this is something I was sharing in my previous webinar as well, that I think the entire application and the components of the tests, the essays, the recommendation letters, the forms, everything kind of matters. So my most critical advice would be to plan well,
Hmm.
and really front load a lot of the work, right? So if I can give what this means tactically for everyone, I would say ideally July and August should be kept for all your non-test related application work, right? So your essays, your personal recommendations, the recommendations you get from your employers, your firm, and just your entire reflective process on your goals, post-MBA experience, etc., etc. Right? So 2 months I think should be good to do that. And I think before that, so up until June, effectively, you can try maximizing your score and at the same time making sure that at least the foundational thinking that you need to put in
Right.
your application process, right? Which is why do I want to do the MBA? What kind of schools do I want to apply to? What are the kind of stories from my life that I really want to talk to? If you can keep running that at the back of your head, right? You don't need to sit down, do anything. If you're traveling ever or just have free time going for a cup of coffee, sometimes just think of that. And I think
Right.
that's what really helped me. So that would be my one tactical advice.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing I would really share is that this is a very tough process. Um, and I was telling Sandeep so before also, I personally think that this process is designed to break you. And
Right.
so when it does, don't
I,
give up.
I I still would like you to elaborate it to people. What do you mean by this, first of
Yeah,
all?
I
Say.
mean, I think for me, my process started in April and it ended in April when I got to know of my results because I applied in round two. And I had a really tough time because I was working while doing this, and
Mm-hmm.
it was an extremely rigorous, and it's a process that consumes a lot out of you, right?
Right.
Not just in terms of time, effort, money, but also in terms of reflection, creative process,
Mm-hmm.
constantly working with your employers to figure out your recommendation or figure out leaves or figure out, what kind of projects can you take so that you can
Mm-hmm.
manage your applications, right? So it's a full army that's kind of behind your application.
Right.
And there are times when you will feel like I'm not good enough, or there are people who are much stronger than me who are applying, or my story is not really clicking, my essay is not really shining through. And I went through that process as any other applicant does. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that I realized in that process is that this process aims to do that to you, right? Because it's
Right.
trying to find out the people who can feel that feeling and still persevere through it, because that's
Right.
exactly the skill that you will need in the 2 years of the MBA and everything that
Mm-hmm.
happens post. So my only other advice would be, don't give up when you feel like giving up, and just persist, put in the work that you can. Just invest as much in the process, forget about the result, forget about trying to be an ideal candidate or a
Mm-hmm.
typical profile in your application. Just be authentic to yourself and you'll be good. So yeah, those are my two specific advice for people applying for round one.
All right.
And yeah, if
There's one.
anyone has
Okay.
any questions,
Yeah. Yeah.
happy to
Please carry
answer.
on. I'll ask you one question afterwards. Yeah.
Yeah,
Please
no,
carry.
no, I was just saying that if anyone has any specific questions about round one, I'm happy to answer that too.
I will say, how do you push through those self-doubt moments? Because this is one thing that people, even preparing for test,
Right.
let's say preparing the applications, thinking about your story, even the
Yeah.
basic storyboarding, even the basic resume, I mean, recommendations, all of that. So,
Yeah.
how do you push through? Like, do you take a break? Do you talk to some people? Do you network with people on LinkedIn who are alums of these places? I mean, what exactly is the specific process to break out of this self-doubt mode? It does happen, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, it's a very good question. I can share what I did.
Yeah.
There were a couple of things that worked for me. The first thing that I did was I had a very clear vision board, which had pictures of what my HBS invite email would look like, what my offer letter would look like.
Oh, wow.
I had photoshopped myself in the campus on the college, and so every time when I went and saw it, I was stuck in the inside of my cupboard. I just felt re-energized that I was basically trying to work towards making that happen. And I feel like when I saw it visually, I got even more motivated. So
Mhm.
that's one trick that I use to constantly keep getting myself motivated. I think
Right.
the other thing was just an orientation that I built, that the MBA is not the end goal, right? It
Hmm.
is a medium or a path to eventually what you want to get to. And
Right.
if what you want to get to is something that really matters to you, then just persevere through the MBA, right? Because you are anyway, what you're going to go through in the application process is probably just a taste tester of what how rigorous the MBA process is anyway going to be, right? So
Hmm.
you're actually preparing yourself for the 2 years post as well.
Right.
So I kind of told myself saying, it really matters to me what my post MBA outlook really looks like. And so all I can control is just showing up every day, moving my to-do list from one point to another, getting things done, and just believing that if I invest in the process and work hard, it will
Hmm.
eventually come through, right? And I think having that belief is super important because it is a long process, right? Even if
Right.
you all apply in round one, you all will hear back about interview invite sometime in late, maybe like mid-October, late October, and then you'll effectively have results by December, right? So from today until December, it's effectively still like 7 months, right?
Right. Right. Right.
Um, so there is belief that is needed in this process and backing yourself, right? So those are the two big things that I did. I think the third that I would really vouch for is just having a support system around you of a few select people, not too many,
Hmm.
but just a few people who know you really well. And in moments where you feel like you're not good enough or you feel like you're losing your motivation, they can effectively bring that energy back in you. Right. So my
Hmm.
mom, some of my best friends played a really, really key role in bringing me
Hmm.
back up and making me hear the things that I needed to believe in myself again. So yeah, those are the three things I would share to make sure that you don't kind of back down from this
Superb. Superb.
process.
You have an amazing clarity of thought and I mean, amazing articulation as well, I
Thank you
must
so
say, because
much.
obviously having gone through this process and having emerged victorious and being on the other side, I think it's so much easier to articulate also now that you must have
Absolutely.
really gone through the pieces of the puzzle.
It's
Uh,
definitely the benefit of hindsight, I would say.
I can understand because yeah, I could guide people better when I had cracked it myself. So it
Right.
really works like that. Another very crucial aspect is, let's say when you take recommendations, you told me in the previous discussion as well that you did not bother too much about the ranking of the individual
Yeah,
within the corporation, but the amount of knowledge that person had about you, maybe
correct.
even immediate supervisor. So what's your take? Can you just reiterate
Sure,
that, please?
absolutely. So, I mean, for everyone's context, there are two recommendation letters that most schools require from you, one from your current employer and one from your previous employer. And there's almost this notion that you should either get recommendations from people who are alums of the schools that you're applying to, or who are extremely senior folks like consulting partners or MDs
Hmm.
or founders or whatever, right? But I think in I think it was one admissions webinar of HBS itself where they literally said that we want to hear from someone who knows you really well and
Hmm.
can thump the table the strongest for you, right?
Wow.
And I think as much as I know it's very difficult to believe that when you're in the process, right? You're like, no, if I get a partner versus my manager to kind of like put in the recommendation, I'm sure the partners will be taken more seriously. I actually think no, right? And I've seen this play out across multiple applications that I've seen through in my journey so far.
Hmm.
So I took a call to actually take the recommendations from my consulting company where I used to work
Hmm.
previously from my manager instead of the partner on the project, mainly because me and my manager had worked so closely together that
Hmm.
his ability to go above and beyond to thump the table for me and say the things that made the school even more interested in me was much higher, right?
Right.
I think the other thing that I would also say what happens when you kind of get a recommendation from someone who's really close to you and understands you
Hmm.
is that their availability while writing the recommendation becomes a lot easier, right? So
Right.
if
Right.
you're trying to catch someone who, let's say, you don't have a daily text message kind of equation, you will not be able to understand that, have you written my recommendation? Have you submitted my recommendation? Have you filled the form that the university
Hmm.
sends you, right? And these basic things you don't want to get wrong. So you
Right.
want someone who's completely in your corner. So would 200% recommend get someone who really, really understands you and thumps the table as strongly for you as possible, not someone who's senior or an alum.
Superb, superb. This is, I mean, another piece of insight because many people don't believe it when we say, but when you say it, probably now being on the other side, it's always so much more reassuring. Another thing, many
Absolutely.
people ask me, and this is a question nobody's right now asked me, nobody's given a chat thing, but this is a very important question. Should you have social impact, especially done for your resume in the last 4 5 months? Should you have some, extracurriculars, as we call them? In the local
Yeah.
lingo, those things. How important is it to now think about them? Okay, it is great that you've been great in your life, you've done 10 things. That's not what I'm asking. How
Right.
important is it to build that or to capture that right now? Yeah.
Sure, absolutely. No, I think it's a good question. I have seen a lot of people think that if they have some sort of like social impact or volunteering or
Mm.
some sort of like extracurricular in the NGO space, their
Mm-hmm.
profile is much better. I personally don't think so, but I'll tell you
Mm.
what schools are looking for, right? I think the way I think about it is schools are looking for what is called a T, right?
Mm.
So if you think about the T, the horizontal is kind of the breadth, right?
Mm.
Are you a well-rounded individual? Do you understand just general business at large or
Mm.
generally how things work at large? Have you had a good amount of experience in
Mm.
whatever you've done, right? So that's kind of the breadth. And then there's the vertical line of the T, which is the depth, right? Is there one thing that you are really good at that only you bring to the table in the school that many other applicants do, right?
Mm.
That depth could be social impact, but it could also be sports. It could also be community building. It could be networking. There are people who've run startups. There are people who
Mm.
understand the crypto space really well. There are people who've had experiences of, let's say, farming or livestock rearing, right?
Mm.
So it could really be any one thing that is kind of your spike or depth. And as long as you can highlight that and show
Mm.
that in a diverse candidate pool of maybe like
Mm.
800, 900 students in a class, here is where I can put my hand up and be the most qualified person in that room to talk about that one thing, right? And I think that's what they want. I don't think they are specifically over optimizing for social impact as such, right? Having said
Mm.
that, the one thing that I will say is for certain schools, they do have a focus on the kind of value you have exhibited to help your community at large, right?
Mm.
But that doesn't need to have a social orientation. It could be something as simple as you went and mentored 15 students in your college to help them crack placements, right?
Mm.
Just anything that you have done outside of your direct scope of responsibilities to show that you care about the larger world, right?
Right.
Whether in a social or a non social context, I think that's helpful to call out, right? So, just in case anyone's interested, specifically for HBS, there are three values that they optimize for in their application that they have written on their website. So you can see
Mm.
it. I think there's leadership potential, there is analytical and problem solving ability, and there is care towards community, right? So
Right.
if you can find that in your
Mm.
life, that's enough. I would re-emphasize the fact that please don't go and create things because they will look good in an application. Schools, in fact, I think it plays negatively where schools
Right.
realize you're trying to game the system or be a certain kind of candidate. And I don't think they appreciate that. So that would be my advice. I hope that helps answer your question.
It
Thank you.
does. In the T that you talked about,
Yeah,
can the depth not be your work itself that you're so good at your?
absolutely.
I mean, just asking because every example you gave was outside of work particularly. But let's say
Yeah,
somebody is outstanding at work itself, which
correct.
you have to be. I mean, you got to be. But
Yeah.
can that also be a selling proposition here?
Yeah, no, absolutely. In fact, my T was my work. I've spent 3 years in the skilling and workforce
Mm.
employment space within India. And so about 10, 15 minutes of my 30-minute HBS interview was just talking about the Indian labor ecosystem and all
Mm-hmm.
the things that I have learned from my 3 years at the startup where we
Mm.
help people get jobs, right? And so I also told my interviewer that, if there's any conversation around skilling or
Mm-hmm.
employment, right, which has basically been my work, I would be very confident in sharing those experiences with everyone else, right?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean I have to be the best in the world or the best in India. It just means that I need to have enough depth to be
Mm.
able to meaningfully contribute to the classroom of a very diverse set of individuals, right? I think what schools at the end are eventually optimizing for is how do we create a very diverse set of students that can learn from each other,
Right.
exchange ideas, and eventually help each other grow, right?
Right.
So absolutely, like work can be your spike too. Like you could be the best SAP implementer, and talk about that, right? Like it doesn't have to be anything specific at all.
Okay. Anything that you recollect from the two interviews or any other interviews that you would have faced that was a very unexpected kind of question, or in the GD that Wharton has, or like anything that you thought, okay, I mean, this is just a complete curveball here. So, was there any such experience? Tell us.
Yeah, I can talk about Wharton first and then maybe HBS. So Wharton actually has a very structured way of interviewing. It's not even an interview, it's a group discussion where
Right.
about six of us across different countries kind of come
Mm-hmm.
together. There's a very clear prompt that is given to
Mm.
you maybe 1 month ago. You prepare for it, you kind of create your own pitch.
Mm.
And then you have to use about 25 minutes in the group discussion to actually bring everyone together towards one common solution. And in
Right.
the last 5 minutes, you have a one-on-one debrief
Mm.
with one of the Wharton panelists to talk about how the GD was, what could go better, what went well.
Mm.
Um, the good thing is that the India community for Wharton applicants is so large that there are a lot of mock GDs that keep running.
Mm.
So it was actually a very, very simple GD, not really, not much happened.
Mm.
The one interesting thing though that came out was one of the one of our group members was actually not speaking enough.
Mm.
And so we had to find a balance between getting them into the group discussion, but at the same time not putting them on the spot.
Mm.
And so that was a tricky one to manage. And Wharton is truly trying to understand, they focus so much on collaboration and teamwork that they're
Mm.
trying to understand that in the GD process over that 1 hour. Like,
Right.
do you work with people from different cultures and different ideas and come together to one single answer, right? And may not just be your answer, it could
Mm.
be someone else's answer too. So
But the
that was the
prompt is
Wharton.
given a month in advance, is what you tell.
Yes, so you
Okay.
have enough time to kind of research. And so
Mm-hmm.
the prompt for us was that we had to create a new course for
Mm.
Wharton's pre-baccalaureate program, which is kind of like
Mm.
for high school
Yeah.
students. We had to create a program for them, right? And it's a 1 minute pitch that you do.
Right.
And the objective of the GD is to come together, all six of us, to
Mm-hmm.
create one program at the end, right? So
Right. Right.
it's actually very fun. I think you think of yourself as like maybe in a meeting at work, right? When you'll
Mm-hmm.
have different ideas and you'll try to come to one solution. So as long as you're respectful, you can articulate your thoughts, but at the same
Right.
time not hog limelight. I think you'll be in a good space. So that was Wharton, far more structured and kind of predictable, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
HBS, I think, is the tricky one. It's the tricky one of all the interviews that happen,
Mm-hmm.
because you actually don't know what your interviewer is going to ask you. With all the most other M7 schools, there is a set of behavioral questions that they ask you,
Mm.
right? Tell me about a time of conflict, tell me about teamwork, tell me about a time when you led someone, tell me about a time when you motivated someone, all of that.
Mm.
But HBS is the one interview where your interview has actually very thoroughly read your essays, your recommendations, your entire form. And so they are not interested in asking you about situations that have happened in your life because they already know that.
Mm-hmm.
So my interview actually started with my interviewer asking me about the fact. So I used to be a journalist when I was young. And so
Mm-hmm.
he asked me saying, "Oh, do you do journalism still?" And I did not expect that question to like randomly come up. And one question that stumped me to answer your question was he asked me what I thought about what was happening in the Indian tech space at large, because
Mm.
I work in it. And he asked me things like, "Oh, like, what are your thoughts and what are the things that Indian tech could solve?
Mm.
What are like the big problems in India that you think that tech could solve?" And it
Mm-hmm.
was completely an out of syllabus question. I had never thought of it. But the good thing is that they're not really looking for a perfect answer. They just want
Right.
you to have an opinion, uh,
Mm-hmm.
be able to articulate that opinion clearly and respectfully, and be open to listening
Right.
to their points of view.
Right.
So yeah, that was the HBS interview.
Remaining questions were kind of expected sorts, right? I mean, in those.
Um, so the interesting thing is that the HBS interview is kind of like a rapid fire
Yeah, too
ish
many
interview.
questions.
Correct. So it was a 30-minute interview for me. I think they would have asked me maybe 25 odd questions. But
Yeah.
the thing is that these are not random questions, right? So they'll pick up one topic.
Mm.
So let's say,
Mm-hmm.
for example, I had worked in a mine when
Mm.
I was at my consulting company. And so they just asked me 5 questions relating to that, saying, "Oh, you did this, but then how did you do that? Okay, how
Mm.
did you convince someone to do this? Okay, what did you say to them? Can you
Mm.
recall that specific conversation?" Right? So they'll go into the depth
Right.
to check a few things, right? One, are you accurately saying things? B,
Mm-hmm.
can you articulate properly? C, and the most important thing that they are checking for is when we put you in a case classroom, right? Which is
Mm.
basically a 90-minute class with 90 students.
Mm.
Will you be able to make a point, a good enough and impactful point in a succinct manner? And they're
Mm-hmm.
basically trying to test that in the interview because they're already convinced by the time you come to the interview that you'll be a good fit in HBS.
Right. Right. Right.
So as long as you're able to kind of articulate well,
Mm-hmm.
and convince them of your opinions, I think you should probably be good in the interview.
Superb, superb. And I think now the visa thing
The
that you'll
visa
be going
process
after,
starts.
right? So, absolutely fantastic. The financial thing, the burden off your mind, because you would have anyway decided to go to Harvard, scholarship or no scholarship.
Yes,
So, you'd probably be thinking about loan or self-funding or what. I mean, that's a lot of work, actually. That's a huge process. So, still, I
absolutely.
think. You will really have a lot on your plate in the next few months still to consider. Talk to so many people going from India and from all around the world, form communities, talk to people who graduated. I think there's a lot that you'll be doing. So fantastic, very exciting times ahead. And they also, I mean, Wharton does so that it sends you a lot of books to study in the beginning. Does HBS as well do this right now? I mean, is there a plan?
Yes.
Because it used to happen when I applied. I think there was a pile of material just sent that, okay, why should we teach you all these things? So is it like
Yeah,
that?
it is true. There's a certain level of readiness that they expect
Mm-hmm,
you to come with, especially for people who've not had business education before, because a lot of people
mm-hmm,
come from engineering or other backgrounds as well.
mm-hmm,
So there's a Wall Street prep company that kind of has reached out to us to actually do like foundational courses in accounting and economics and financial modeling and things like that. But what HBS specifically does is, I think in another month, they actually send you a basic test,
right.
and if you pass that test, then it's great. But if you don't, and that's completely fine if you don't, they effectively send you about some 40, 50 hours kind of coursework that you
Mm-hmm,
can do over the next 2 months to be ready to come into class so that you're not behind when it comes to catching up on basic
mm-hmm.
concepts, which I think it's great actually,
It
to
is
make sure that
great,
everyone's on
absolutely.
the same page in terms
Yeah.
of their foundational understanding.
So I'm sure
So yeah,
economics and behavioral, I mean, the financial modeling, accounting,
correct.
these won't be your things. You would already be pretty proficient at
Let's
these,
see now.
but
I'll take the test so I'll know better.
right, right. All right. Thanks for joining
Fantastic.
in. I mean, it has been wonderful speaking to you, and thanks for doing it for the second time for this special group of people. And all the very best. Do keep in touch. And whenever there's the scholarship letter from Harvard that is there, I will not show anyone. I'll promise this time. But do share that with me as well.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
absolutely. No, thank you so much for having me. I think all the best to everyone gearing up for round one. If there's any way I can still help, just feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn and
Right.
happy to help forward.
Thanks, Arshita. Thanks. This
Awesome.
has been
Take care.
wonderful. Bye bye. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.